At 2 a.m., under bright neon lights, the auto plant does not feel alive. It feels awake against its will. A factory hand stands beside the line with an impact wrench in his grip, tightening bolts every 30 seconds. Zzt-zzt. Move. Zzt-zzt. Move. The sound repeats until it no longer sounds like a tool. It sounds like a clock counting down the parts of him that are still paying attention. And that is the quiet danger of repetitive work. It does not always break you with pain. Sometimes it softens the edge of your mind until you stop noticing the moment you are inside. Your hands keep moving. Your eyes stay open. But somewhere beneath the neon, your presence starts to drift. Most people think discipline is tested when life gets dramatic. A crisis. A fight. A deadline that can ruin everything. But Zanshin teaches a colder truth. Sometimes the test is a bolt, a wrist, a sound, a motion repeated so many times that the mind begins to disappear. So what does it mean to stay awake when nothing feels new? Tonight, the lesson is not escape from the line. It is learning how to stand inside the rhythm without surrendering your attention to numbness. The factory hand does not look like a man in crisis. That is what makes the scene easy to miss. He is wearing safety glasses with a faint smear across the left lens. His gloves are dark at the fingertips from the same work done over and over. His boots know the exact distance between his station and the yellow line on the floor. A half-empty gas station coffee sits near the post behind him, cold now, with the plastic lid pushed in from where his thumb pressed too hard earlier in the night. Nothing about him is dramatic. He is not yelling. He is not collapsing. He is not making some grand speech about how tired he is. He is just standing there at 2 a.m. in the bright neon wash of the auto plant, waiting for the next chassis to slide into place. The line moves. He lifts the impact wrench. Zzt-zzt. The bolt tightens. He lowers the tool. 30 seconds later, he does it again. And somewhere in that repetition, the mind starts making its quiet little bargain. I can do this without being here. That is the first lie of numbness. At the start of the shift, attention still has edges. He hears the wrench clearly. He feels the torque travel through his wrist and into his forearm. He notices the angle of the socket, the slight pull of the hose, the flash of reflected neon across the painted metal. He knows the job is simple, but simple does not mean careless. Simple means there is nowhere to hide. But by 2 a.m., the body has memorized the motion so well that the mind tries to leave. It drifts toward the unpaid bill folded in the cup holder of his truck. It drifts toward the text from his brother he still has not answered, because the message had asked a simple question and he did not have the energy to become a person after work. It drifts toward the small private irritation of being needed by machines more consistently than by people. Then the next frame arrives. Lift. Press. Zzt-zzt. Release. And the danger is not that he suddenly stops working. The danger is that he continues working without fully occupying the work. Mental numbness is not laziness. It is more subtle than that. Laziness knows it is avoiding something. Numbness convinces you that absence is efficiency. It tells you that because your hands can perform the task, your attention is no longer required. It makes the present moment feel beneath you, too small to deserve your full mind. That is how people lose command in ordinary places. Not because the task is too hard. Because the task becomes familiar enough to disrespect. On the outside, the plant keeps its rhythm. Conveyor belts hum. Metal frames shift forward under white light. Somewhere down the line, another tool barks in short bursts. The floor vibrates faintly through the soles of his boots. A supervisor walks past with a clipboard, not angry, not friendly, just moving through the night like another part of the machinery. The factory hand nods without really seeing him. His station is clean enough. His count is fine. The bolts are tight. But inside, something is thinned out. His eyes keep tracking the part, but they stop studying it. His hand keeps lifting the impact wrench, but the grip becomes dull. The zzt-zzt becomes background noise instead of information. The sound that should return him to the exact moment starts to blur into the walls. This is where Zanshin enters, not as a mystical idea, but as a discipline of not abandoning what your body is doing. Zanshin means remaining mind. Lingering awareness. The attention that stays after the obvious moment has passed. In a place like this, it is not a warrior staring across a battlefield. It is a tired man on a night shift refusing to become a ghost with a tool in his hand. That sounds small until you have had to do it. Because repetition has a way of insulting the ego. The mind says, I already know this. I have done this 1,000 times. I could do it half asleep. And maybe that is true for a while. But the part of you that goes half asleep during small duties does not always wake up cleanly when the stakes rise. The way you perform the repeated motion trains the way you meet the unexpected one. That is why the impact wrench matters. In an undisciplined moment, he treats it like a noisemaker. Grab, hit, release. He lets the tool drag him through the shift. The bolt becomes just another bolt. The sound becomes just another sound. His body remains useful, but his attention becomes unemployed. You can see it in the small mistakes before they become real mistakes. The socket lands a little rougher than it needs to. His shoulder tightens because his wrist is not aligned. His eyes jump ahead to the clock before the current bolt is finished. He catches himself thinking about the break room vending machine while the wrench is still in motion. None of it looks serious. That is why it is serious. Most loss of presence begins as something you can explain away. I'm tired. It's late. I've done this all night. Everybody zones out. All of that may be true. But Zanshin does not ask whether the excuse is understandable. It asks whether your attention has left the place where your duty is happening. A disciplined response looks almost identical from 20 feet away. That is important. The factory hand nods without really seeing him. His station is clean enough. His count is fine. The bolts are tight. But inside, something is thinned out. His eyes keep tracking the part, but they stop studying it. His hand keeps lifting the impact wrench, but the grip becomes dull. The zzt-zzt becomes background noise instead of information. The sound that should return him to the exact moment starts to blur into the walls. This is where Zanshin enters, not as a mystical idea, but as a discipline of not abandoning what your body is doing. Zanshin means remaining mind. Lingering awareness. The attention that stays after the obvious moment has passed. In a place like this, it is not a warrior staring across a battlefield. It is a tired man on a night shift refusing to become a ghost with a tool in his hand. That sounds small until you have had to do it. Because repetition has a way of insulting the ego. The mind says, I already know this. I have done this 1,000 times. I could do it half asleep. And maybe that is true for a while. But the part of you that goes half asleep during small duties does not always wake up cleanly when the stakes rise. The way you perform the repeated motion trains the way you meet the unexpected one. That is why the impact wrench matters. In an undisciplined moment, he treats it like a noisemaker. Grab, hit, release. He lets the tool drag him through the shift. The bolt becomes just another bolt. The sound becomes just another sound. His body remains useful, but his attention becomes unemployed. You can see it in the small mistakes before they become real mistakes. The socket lands a little rougher than it needs to. His shoulder tightens because his wrist is not aligned. His eyes jump ahead to the clock before the current bolt is finished. He catches himself thinking about the break room vending machine while the wrench is still in motion. None of it looks serious. That is why it is serious. Most loss of presence begins as something you can explain away. I'm tired. It's late. I've done this all night. Everybody zones out. All of that may be true. But Zanshin does not ask whether the excuse is understandable. It asks whether your attention has left the place where your duty is happening. A disciplined response looks almost identical from 20 feet away. That is important. Training begins before the shift feels meaningful. It begins while the line is still moving, while the neon is still too bright, while the same frame slides into the same position and the impact wrench hangs in his hand with the weight of something he has already done 1,000 times. He does not wait for motivation. Motivation has no business being trusted at 2 a.m. in an auto plant. He starts smaller than that. The next chassis locks into place. His first impulse is to rush through it, to let muscle memory take the wheel and let his mind go gray again. Instead, he does one thing so ordinary no one around him would even notice. He adjusts his feet. Not dramatically. Not like a man preparing for combat. He just plants both boots flat on the marked floor, feels the pressure settle through his heels, and lets the vibration of the line tell him where he is. The rubber under his soles. The faint tremor in the concrete. The yellow line beside his station. The bolt waiting in front of him. That is the first cut through numbness. Location. Mental numbness feeds on vagueness. It wants the whole night to blur into one long, meaningless corridor. So he refuses the blur. He gives the moment edges again. Floor. Frame. Bolt. Tool. Breath. The impact wrench is still in his hand, but now he feels it instead of merely holding it. The grip presses into his glove. The balance of the tool pulls slightly forward. His forearm wants to stay tight from habit, So he loosens his fingers for half a second before he places the socket. That half second matters. A numb mind hates half seconds. It wants to skip them. It wants to collapse all small actions into one dull motion. Grab, press, release, repeat. But Zanshin lives inside the half second before contact, before the trigger, before the body gives itself away to habit. He places the socket cleanly over the bolt head. He does not slam it. He does not jab at it. He lets metal meet metal with enough care to feel the difference. Then he pulls the trigger. Zzt-zzt. This time, he listens to the sound all the way through. The first burst catches. The second settles. The tool kicks gently against his wrist. He lets the torque finish instead of mentally leaving before the motion is complete. When the wrench stops, he keeps his eyes on the bolt for one breath longer than usual. Not because he is trying to be perfect. Because he is training himself not to vanish. The line moves again. 30 seconds, that number could become a prison if he thinks of it as the rest of the night. Hundreds of repetitions. Hours of standing. The same sound until sunrise. If he lets his mind widen that far, the numbness returns almost with relief. It says, don't feel all of this. Don't be here for all of this. So he shrinks the battle. Not the whole shift. Not the whole plant. Not his whole life outside the plant. One bolt. One clean placement. One honest sound. One breath before the next frame. He looks at the next bolt and lets that be enough territory for his attention. This is not a trick for pretending the work is easy. The work is still repetitive. His shoulders are still tired. His eyes still feel dry under the bright neon. The cold coffee is still sitting behind him like a bad decision in a paper cup. Nothing has become poetic just because he noticed it. But the mind has been given a job again. And a mind with a job is harder to numb. The next time the wrench rises, he checks his wrist angle before the trigger. A small correction. A degree or two. Enough to keep the tool from fighting him. Enough to keep his shoulder from taking strain it does not need. In that correction, discipline becomes practical. It is not a speech about toughness. It is a tired man refusing to make his own work sloppier by abandoning his body. Zzt-zzt. He exhales after the second sound. The exhale is not spiritual. It is mechanical in the best sense. A reset valve. A way of telling his nervous system, this motion is finished, and the next one has not begun yet. That boundary matters. Without boundaries, repetition turns into fog. One bolt leaks into the next. 1 minute leaks into the next. 1 hour leaks into another until he no longer knows whether he is tired, angry, bored, or simply gone. So he builds small boundaries inside the rhythm. Tool up. Socket seated. Trigger. Zzt-zzt. Tool down. Breath. Eyes return. Again, the ritual does not slow the line. It does not make him inefficient. If anything, it saves him from the kind of sloppy speed that comes from trying to escape the present. He is not worshipping the bolt. He is not pretending factory work is a sacred ceremony. He is doing something more grounded. He is making the smallest unit of his duty worthy of clean attention. At 2 a.m., that is enough to change the night. Because numbness does not leave all at once. It loosens one detail at a time. First, he hears the wrench again. Then he feels the grip again. Then he notices the reflection of neon sliding across the metal. Then he catches the moment his eyes try to drift toward the clock. That one is important. The clock is where the tired mind goes to suffer twice. It looks at time, hates what it sees, then returns to the work carrying extra weight. He cannot stop time by staring at it. He can only lose the bolt in front of him. So when his eyes start to pull toward the clock, he brings them back to the socket. Not harshly. He does not insult himself. He does not call himself weak. He does not turn discipline into punishment. He simply returns. That return is the whole practice. The mind wanders. The hand notices. The sound calls him back. Zzt-zzt. There is a quiet mercy in that. The same repetition that was making him numb can become the rope he uses to climb out. Every 30 seconds, the line gives him another chance to wake up without drama. Every bolt becomes a small checkpoint. Not a test of worth. A test of presence. Can he hear this one? Can he place this one cleanly? Can he finish this motion before reaching for the next? Can he stay in his body for 30 more seconds? This is Shugyo inside Zanshin, training through repetition without turning the body into a machine or the mind into smoke. It is not about grinding until nothing bothers him. That would just be another kind of disappearance. The point is to remain sensitive enough to notice, steady enough to continue, and honest enough to correct the next small thing. If the fatigue becomes unsafe, he follows the rules. He speaks up. He rotates out if the job requires it. Real discipline does not gamble with safety to protect pride. But inside the safe rhythm of the work, he trains. The impact wrench rises again. This time, it is not just a tool dragging him through the night. It is an anchor. Its weight tells him he is here. Its sound cuts the fog. Its recoil reminds him that attention lives in the body before it becomes an idea. Zzt-zzt. The bolt tightens. The line moves. And he returns before he disappears. The plant does not become quiet. That would be a lie. The conveyor still drags the night forward in measured pieces. The lights are still too bright for 2 a.m., bleaching the color out of faces and steel. The floor still carries that low vibration into his boots. Somewhere behind him, the cold coffee waits untouched, and the clock still refuses to move like a merciful thing. Nothing outside him has softened. The line keeps coming. Frame after frame. Bolt after bolt. 30 seconds. Then 30 more. But now, the repetition does not swallow him as easily. The impact wrench rests in his hand with a different meaning. Earlier in the night, it was just weight. Just noise. Just another object attached to another tired shift. Now he feels the tool before it moves. He feels the grip settle into the glove. He feels the slight forward pull. He feels the place where his wrist wants to get lazy, where the shoulder wants to take over, where the mind wants to skip the small correction because no one is watching closely enough to care. He cares. Not loudly. Not in some proud, dramatic way. He cares the way a disciplined person cares when the work is ordinary and the world will never applaud the effort. The next frame arrives. His eyes do not jump to the clock. They stay with the bolt. He places the socket cleanly, and for one breath, the whole plant narrows to metal, hand, angle, sound. Zzt-zzt. The wrench kicks once, then settles. He lets the motion finish. That is the change. Not happiness. Not excitement. Not some sudden love for the night shift. His back still aches in that dull way men stop mentioning after a while. His eyelids still feel heavy. His mind still tries, every few minutes, to drift toward the truck, the unpaid bill, the unanswered text, the bed he will reach when the sun is already up. The shadow has not vanished. Mental numbness is still waiting for him at the edge of the rhythm. But it no longer owns the whole floor. There is a difference between being tired and being absent. Tonight, he starts to understand the difference in his hands. A little earlier, the zzt-zzt sound had become a blur. It had turned into wallpaper. It had faded into the same dead noise as the lights, the belts, the fans, the distant clank from another station. Now the sound cuts the night into pieces he can actually enter. Zzt-zzt. Done. Breathe. Next. Zzt-zzt. Done. Breathe. Next. The rhythm is still mechanical, but he is not. That is the quiet victory of Zanshin. It does not rescue him from repetition. It teaches him not to disappear inside it. A supervisor passes again with the clipboard. This time, the factory hand sees him clearly. Not with resentment. Not with the dull suspicion that everyone above him is just measuring output and missing the person doing the work. He just sees him. Gray hoodie under the safety vest, tired eyes. Pen tucked behind the ear. Another man moving through the same artificial night, carrying his own version of the line. The factory hand gives a small nod. This one lands differently. Earlier, his nod had been automatic, almost empty. A movement without a person inside it. Now it is brief, plain, human. He is still working. Still tired. Still not trying to make the moment bigger than it is. But his attention has returned enough to recognize another body under the lights. That matters. Because numbness does not only steal precision. It steals relationship. It makes people into shapes. It makes the room into background. It makes your own life feel like something happening near you instead of through you. The next bolt waits. He brings the wrench up. For a second, his mind slips. It happens fast. A gray pull. A blank place. The thought of how many more parts are coming before break. The old irritation rises with it, almost familiar enough to feel like company. Here we go again. His jaw tightens. His eyes start to lift toward the clock. Then the weight of the impact wrench catches his attention. Not the idea of the wrench. The actual weight. The pressure in his palm. The seam inside the glove. The tool's balance pulling him back into his wrist. He returns. No speech. No punishment. No heroic correction. Just the socket meeting the bolt again. zzt-zzt. This time, the return itself is the transformation. A lesser version of discipline would demand that he never drift. That he become some flawless machine of awareness, sharp every second, untouched by fatigue. But that is not human. That is fantasy wearing work boots. Real discipline is humbler. The mind leaves. You notice. You come back before the absence becomes your home. Again and again, he practices that return. By the middle of the hour, the line has not slowed, but something in him has stopped leaking away. He is not counting the whole night anymore. He is not trying to defeat repetition as if repetition were an enemy. He is entering each 30-second window like it has a door, and the handle is in his hand. Impact wrench. Bolt. Sound. Breath. The anchor has changed. At the beginning, the tool was proof that he was trapped in the same motion. In the middle, it became a way to cut through the fog. Now, near the end of this small inner battle, it becomes a reminder of who he chooses to be when the task is too familiar to flatter him. Anyone can pay attention when the moment feels important. Zanshin is what remains when the moment looks beneath your pride. The line moves again under the bright neon. A new frame slides into place. The bolt waits exactly where it always waits. He lifts the impact wrench. His wrist aligns. His breath settles. zzt-zzt. And inside that ordinary sound, a tired man stays present enough to remain himself. The line did not change. The hand returned. When the shift finally moves toward morning, the factory hand is not transformed into someone untouched by fatigue. He is still tired. His boots still ache against the concrete. The neon still makes every face look pale and unfinished. The impact wrench still hangs from his hand with the same weight it had at 2 a.m. But now, that weight means something different. It is no longer just the burden of repetition. It is the reminder that attention can return through the smallest door. A grip. A breath. A sound. zzt-zzt. The mind comes back to the hand. The hand comes back to the work. The work comes back to the moment. And maybe your assembly line does not look like an auto plant. Maybe it is a desk after midnight, answering the same emails until your eyes go dull. Maybe it is a kitchen sink full of plates after a long shift, when nobody thanks you and the house is finally quiet. Maybe it is the morning commute, the same red lights, the same tired face in the windshield. Your battlefield may be repetitive, ordinary, almost invisible. That is why it matters. Today, choose one small motion and fully enter it. Place the cup down. Close the laptop with care. Hear the click of the door. Do not let familiarity turn your life into background noise. The present moment becomes a blade only when attention gives it an edge.